Burgess here with Music Marketing TV, and today we're looking at FabFilter's TWIN 3. This is going to be a everything you need to know about TWIN 3 video. So if you're unfamiliar with synthesis, if it's your first go, this is going to be extremely helpful. If you're just looking for details specific to TWIN 3, there might be a lot of overlap here because we will be discussing some basics, but we will be going into a little bit of the details and the weeds here. So let's just start off over here with the oscillator. You could choose your source here. There's a bunch of different sources. So we have a saw, a square. The square is a pulse width. And then we have a square pure. So whenever they say pure, there's like more analog versions of them. So this is pure square. And so generally the pure ones sound brighter. So here's triangle. Here's triangle pure. In fact, let's bring this filter. Let's just bring the filter out. Triangle. Triangle pure. So you can see the big difference on that one. Sine wave, white noise, and pink noise. So that's our sources. We're mostly going to just stick to saws for now. We have tuning here. The tuning will become important in just a sec when we look at ring modulation. But pretty straightforward there. And if you control click, you can reset a value. We have oscillator sync. This has to do with, well, first you can just see visually what's going on. It's kind of a way of subdividing waveforms. It's a kind of a crass way to put it, but that's kind of how you can think of it. Now there is a sync option here. So what this does is it makes it so that when you click it, whenever you hit a note, it'll reset the sync to the same spot. So let's really quick, let me demonstrate. Let's put down several quick notes. This is where it's kind of the most obvious. And we'll also probably bring in a second oscillator. So let's say that we have something that has a lot of repetition. And let's bring in a second oscillator. So these two oscillators, they could be at different phases. We don't know. Right now they're at different octaves. Let's make them the same octave. So you hear how there's some movement. You can even see it visually, like there's a phasing because the two don't line up quite exactly because of the engine. There's small differences between them. To overcome this, we can implement a phase sync so that when notes hit, they always start at the same phase in the oscillation. So it's not a sync to another oscillator, because it is a little strange that there's like a sync option here, but it's not synced to another oscillator. Instead, it's synced to a note on event. So if you now play, right on point. If you have either one of them off though, they will move relative to the other. That's synced. That is not synced. So that's when these controls are going to matter a little bit more. This is just a way of sort of getting more tonal texture. It's a way of getting more harmonics out. You can do interesting things with the timbre of the sound. You have panning at the top on each voice, and you also have a level control of each oscillator, I should say, not voice. This right here is ring mod. So whenever you have two pairs, you're able to do ring mod between them. So ring modulation is basically, it's very similar to amplitude modulation. So this is where the detune will really matter a ton because it defines the ratio they're detuned at. So for example, let's just go to, let's just leave it at 6. So if you go up 700, or just 7, I should say. I'm used to thinking in cents. So this is in semitones. That's usually a pretty good harmonic ratio because it is a perfect fifth. And let's change our notes here to one big long note. And you can see that sounds actually pretty fine. If we were to move this though, and then if we had them come out as a layer, there's your fifth. Kind of an old school kind of sound there. So anyways, that is the oscillators. That's literally all you really need to know. Like, that's it. So from here, you could get more interesting. For example, we could have that ring mod. We could add a envelope generator. And this is just another envelope here. And we could connect this up to the tuning here. So then when we hit a note, this is going to move it by some amount. And let's bring the sustain all the way down. And then we could use this as a kind of attack. And then we could try and find a spot that we think this is going to work well. And maybe we actually bring the sustain all the way up. Maybe we want a little bit of movement, so we're a little off, and then we make this a lot longer. 25 seconds is too long. Let's make this like, I don't know, 3 seconds, sure. Kind of cool, right? Now, we could also come in, we could bring in a reverb. Of course. And we could, of course, play chords. We might want to pick stuff that's a little further apart. And you could create some cool stuff that way. So let's back off a little bit. Let's go back to some more basic stuff. That's not that complicated of a patch though, but you get some really cool stuff going really quick. Let's go ahead. Let's take a look here at the filters. Oh, before we do so, let's look at the Portamento Legato. So there's Portamento. If we have two notes that overlap, let's use MIDI so that it's exactly the same every time. So here's a note and here's another note. They overlap. And right now we have polyphony, so it's going to play them the same. You know, it's going to dedicate voices to this. So if we want to avert this, at the bottom we have a poly. And in poly, we could change to mono or per oscillator. So per oscillator assigns like each oscillator individually to whatever the control is. You're going to notice this in various places, per oscillator. So in this case, it's going to assign oscillators to the voices. So what this is basically saying is we can play 10 things and each thing gets one of those things. So right now I'm playing one note and it's generating, you know, one note. We could play up to 10 notes. Let's change this to 2. So this is, now if I play one note, now if I play another, but if I play a third one after that, it's going to go to something else. So it's leaving off previous notes because it can only, I'm playing something and it's only able to do, you know, one of those. It only has 2 voices to work with and each one takes 1. If I change this to 2, now whenever I play a note, it's going to take those full 2 voices. And this is going to generate copies now. So now, even though I'm hitting one note, it's generating 2 of that oscillator. And when I play another note, it has to give up what it was playing because it ran out of voices. And we can now spread those voices out. So if we have them very narrow, this is a great way of getting phase variation, by the way. And if we give ourselves, let's say, 48 voices, and we give this 48, 48 of these saw waves will be generated. And every single one of these, when I hit a note, it's going to generate 48 saw waves, and they're all going to be dedicated to that first note I hit. And it's hilariously loud, and phase really becomes a lot more apparent if we were to really spread this out. So that is something that's, and this particular synth, it does this extremely well compared to others that are out there. Being able to go up to 64 is extremely odd. So this is like, you could really crunch something hard with this. So while we're in here, by the way, we're in poly. If we do mono, that means that it can only dedicate them to one voice anyways. So if we were to go down, let's just go down to 2. And let's bring this down to 1. If we tried playing another note, it just won't let us. So mono is kind of what you would think of as legato, but we have a separate legato control here. We'll get to that in a bit. Let's bring this up to like 8. That's plenty, trust me. And let's go up to per oscillator. So what this is going to do is it's going to generate for each oscillator, it's going to get its own dedicated voices. So let's pick another one. Let's make this one a triangle, and let's make this one a sine. So you see when I play a note, the first note gets dedicated to the first voice, and we don't hear anything from the triangle. As soon as I play another note, we hear the triangle, which is being dedicated to the second voice. Now, if I were to change this to 2, now 2 voices are being dedicated to the sine wave, and when I hit the triangle, it's going to get 2 voices dedicated to it. And then we go again. And then we could continue going. So very, very interesting. These controls here are fascinating. Then there's also a bunch of like tuning stuff. I'm not going to go into tuning here, but there is the ability to import tuning if you want to follow some specific world tuning scheme. They're possible here. I believe there's actually a specific format, but I haven't looked into the tuning thing specifically. So it's going to be up to you to check that out. If that's something you're interested in. Anyways, from here, we can see there's actually kind of 2 ways to do mono. So there's true mono, where you can only play one note at a time, and this makes it so you can do trills and stuff. But if we go to poly and instead change it to 8, this will not let us do trills. Because as soon as so I'm holding down one note, as soon as I hit another, it'll go to that note, but when I let go, it doesn't go back to the note I was holding, because all the voices dedicated to that note event are now gone. They were moved to the new one. It doesn't like remember. So if you're looking for the more intuitive behavior, you're going to want to choose mono and change your voices. So you can do that. So when you're playing notes. Anyways, that's a little bit on the voices there. All right, now let's take a look over here at the portamento. So the portamento is a way of gliding from one note to another, and then there's a legato mode. If I have just regular portamento at 0, notes will behave how we want. Now remember, we're still in mono here with 8/8. So when you're hearing stuff, just keep that in mind. So nothing shocking there. If I bring the portamento up, now if I hit 2 notes separately, you can hear them gliding to each other. Now, if I hold one note down and then hit the next note, it still glides. But if I hit them separately, they still glide there as well. Now, if I have the legato on, when I play the notes, so that wasn't the greatest example. If I play the notes and separate them, so there's a gap that I do not hold any keys down, they will no longer glide. So let me show with MIDI. Okay, so let's say that I have a note and then I hit another note, but I'm still overlapping the notes. This will glide with legato. But if I have them like this will not glide. If I have legato off, it'll just always glide. That's what that does. So if you're looking for always gliding, you just want to leave this alone. If you're looking to only glide when notes overlap, you want this on. That's the difference. Sometimes with leads, you really want gliding always. Sometimes you don't. Sometimes you want it to be more like a clarinetist would sort of play it. So anyways, that's what legato does. And then we have some tuning here. That's just, the same as these, only just for everything. Okay, let's move over to the filters. So the filters themselves, there's a bunch of different types. If you grab from the different edges, you can get the different versions. This is a peak, a high pass, and a low pass. Interestingly, these filter numbers can be related to the oscillators. We'll get to that in a second. So this is a low pass, high pass. We have a band pass, a bell, a low shelf, a high shelf, and a notch. Let's stick to a low pass for now. Change it to a 6 dB per octave. Now, if you go to 6 dB per octave, you do not have the ability to affect the Q value. So this is the most gentle one. Let's go to something more extreme like 48. Now we have a Q value. And this is where the other filter modes become more like distortions almost. So you have all these different modes. So I'm on extreme right now. We can go to clean. And yeah, it could get pretty dang wild. So let's add a envelope generator and set this up to move the filter for us. And let's give it more rain to move. And let's bring the sustain on this down, just so we can hear what the different versions do. So let's give it a little more Q. So that is clean. And, you know, kind of your classic sort of acid sound. Here's classic. And we have gentle, raw, tube, metal, easy going. Let's make this a little bit longer. Smooth. Hard. Let's change the cutoff so the peak's a little more broad. So I switched that to a 12 dB per octave. Extreme. And then finally we're back to clean. So let's go for something like raw. Let's make it not move up so much. And now we could add in another filter. Say we still want some high end. We could click in a filter. We could bring in a high pass. Say we still want some of this high end, but we just don't want this middle section only when this filter is moving. That's possible. We can go into parallel. And what this does is it now sends this filter to each one of these in parallel. And if we were to have this be a whole lot lower, we still hear this down here. So this allows you some really cool control in terms of being able to shape the spectrum exactly how you want. And serial, it goes through 1, then 2. So since 2 has already been filtered out, there's just nothing for 2 to do. So this would not be something you want. It's probably something more like that. So it's like a combo of all the filters also, but it's at the end. So whatever survives, where they overlap. And then we have a per oscillator. So if we have another oscillator, now oscillator 1 will go to 1, oscillator 2 will go to 2. And keep in mind how our settings down here could affect this. So we could, for example, give each oscillator 4 voices. We could spread them out. And then the first 4 is going to go here from oscillator 1. Second 4 is going to go here from oscillator 2. So we might give ourselves a longer attack. And we have some global offset controls here that move everything together. And some peak offsets. Yeah. So moving these with modulation can get quite trippy as well. But that's how these things behave. A per oscillator is very fun to mess with. You can come up with some really interesting ways to sort of put things together. And the global controls are so handy because it would just be annoying if you had to constantly set up something to move everything as a macro. So anyways, that's what's going on there. Finally, at the end, we just have effects. So these are all very straightforward. You have a reverb, brightness, time, pre-delay. Get rid of that. Bring this up. Bring the brightness, whoops, down. I'm not sure if you're supposed to be able to do that. That was probably going to be changed at some point. Okay, click off that. We'll go to the delay. Now, the delay has several more options. Let's bring it on. Let's mix it in. We could have it filter so only the high stuff really comes through. And again, you can add, I believe, up to 4 here as well. Yep, it's 4. And you have all the same goodness here, but now it's just affected on the delay. So it's like a whole nother filter section unto itself. And if you make the delay very short, it can get really crazy. You can change how the delay comes out and the amount of feedback. I don't want to spend too much time on effects since effects I think are pretty straightforward usually. Of course, you can do double or single copies. Change the amount, bring the delay down maybe. We could bring the unison in also as another way to get a really phasey sort of different sound. And let's make these up. Make it a bit tighter, bring the verb in. We have a phaser. If we bring that over, we've got here a phaser and a flanger. Very similar vibes, flangers. You can sort of picture like, I think drum sounds are probably the most popular when you hear a flanger. And then we'll leave the flanger on. Distortion. Now the distortion could be pre and post. So sometimes you don't want distortion after your verb. It's usually a bad idea because then it just yanks the verb up and screws it all up. So if we put it in pre, now when we drive it, versus in post, the verb will get, yeah, so that you hear all the verb on that. So if we do this, the verb's still like clear as day. And all the other effects also come through a little bit more nicely. So that's why you might want to move the verb around, and that's why that effect exists specifically here. And then finally, you have a compressor. And if you come in here, you have your different options with an auto gain also, which is very helpful. So yeah, we can bring the threshold down, bring the attack back. So if you want to get something really punchy out of here, totally possible. And I should also mention, each one of these things with a drop down can be saved as a setting. So if you want like a specific setting set up for each of these, you can do so. Anyways, that's it. That's pretty much it. That's everything. It's literally the whole thing. It kind of blows me away that the synth, you can make so many sounds with these tools because of there's almost secrets in the way the filters interact with each other, the way all these tiny modulations come together to make the full sound. It's fascinating to me just how all this stuff can come together. So we'll be taking a look into more advanced sound design concepts with actual target sounds that we're going after. But this is the core. Like if you have these down, you can fiddle with most stuff, try out different ideas. You can get some really cool results. Try out high spreads, low spreads. Try messing with ring modulation, no ring modulation, bring in voices, try them at ratios, bring in filter movements. And then the world of modulation, I didn't go into the modulators because I think the modulators are very straightforward. You have sliders, envelope generators, envelope followers, LFOs. And the LFOs, by the way, can sort of double as sequencers if you add a bunch of steps and then like, customize them. We don't want random on some of these steps. You can basically have them be sequencers, as you can see. So this is like a whole world unto itself, I suppose. But yeah, there's a ton of power here for you to get going with. But hopefully this answers any questions you had about Twin 3. If you have any questions, comments, criticisms, concerns, leave them down below. Subscribe and hit the bell icon for future videos, and have a blessed day.